I stayed kneeling, glass slicing into my palm, as I picked up the pieces of my shattered phone. She didn't flinch, didn't ask if I was hurt. My daughter just sipped her wine and said, "You don't need to talk to anyone anyway." After years of holding my tongue so she could find hers, after sacrificing friendships, finances, and fragments of myself to keep her life intact, I realized she wasn't silencing me. She was isolating me. So I made sure the next silence she heard was her own. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The forks hadn't even touched the plates. Candlelight flickered against polished glassware as conversation hovered in awkward politeness. Ethan had just refilled a guest's wine when Hannah's voice sliced through the quiet like a box cutter. "Ruth, for once, could you not insert yourself into every conversation?" Ruth blinked. The room froze around her. She'd only said a sentence, just trying to soften the tension between Hannah and her younger brother, but now everyone stared like she'd committed a felony. Hannah leaned forward from the head of the table, her manicured fingers coiled around the stem of her wine glass. "You always do this," she hissed. "You think every damn thing needs your opinion." "No, Ruth started, voice brittle. But Hannah was already rising, circling the table with calculated calm. She came to a stop behind Ruth's chair. "What's so important, huh?" she murmured. Eyes locked on the phone in Ruth's lap. "Who are you texting now, trying to stir things up?" Before Ruth could respond, Hannah snatched the phone from her hands. "Hannah," Ethan said sharply, half rising from his seat. She ignored him. Without warning, Hannah hurled the phone across the tile. It hit the wall with a sickening crack. The screen burst into a jagged spiderweb before the device tumbled to the ground with a final pathetic thunk. Gasps rippled. The clink of cutlery stilled. "You don't need to talk to anyone anyway," Hannah said, voice low but dripping venom. She smirked as she returned to her seat like nothing had happened, lifting her wine glass with a satisfied hum. Ruth's breath caught in her throat. The room seemed to tilt sideways. She pushed back her chair and knelt silently beside the wall, grabbing a paper napkin from the sideboard. Her hands shook as she began collecting the shattered glass. The pieces were sharp. She didn't flinch when the first shard sliced her palm. Ethan stood frozen, his mouth opening, then closing. No one moved to help. Across the table, their guests fixed their eyes on their plates, chewing mechanically, pretending not to notice the blood blooming on the napkin in Ruth's hand. One woman, Ethan's colleague's wife, muttered something about needing fresh air and slipped from her chair. Ruth didn't look up. She crouched there in her soft blue dress, hair falling across her face, gathering the remnants of something small but intimate. Not just a phone, something that connected her to the outside world, to herself. No one apologized. No one acknowledged it, just the quiet scrape of glass against tile. Eventually, the table chatter resumed, soft, stilted, like actors stumbling through forgotten lines. The roast was passed. Glasses clinked half-heartedly. Hannah laughed at something no one found funny. The performance rolled on. Later, after the guests filtered out into the autumn night and the front door shut behind the last awkward goodbye, Ruth remained on the kitchen floor. The pieces of the phone sat in a neat pile on a folded dish towel beside her. She hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Iris came down the stairs barefoot, her hoodie sleeves pushed past her elbows, and paused at the doorway. She said nothing for a moment. Then she crossed the room, knelt beside Ruth, and studied the broken phone with narrowed eyes. Ruth's fingers were stained pink, the cuts already clotting. Her eyes were dry, unfocused. "She didn't even check if you were okay," Iris murmured. Ruth gave a slow, bitter exhale through her nose. "She never does." They sat together in silence. Then Iris reached into her own hoodie pocket and pulled out something small, a flash drive on a faded red lanyard. She placed it gently on Ruth's knee. "What's this?" Ruth asked, not yet taking it. Iris looked toward the darkened hallway where Hannah had disappeared, then back at Ruth. "Proof. The flash drive still rested on Ruth's knee, untouched. She hadn't spoken in 10 full minutes. Just sat on the kitchen tile, palms cupped over her knees like the weight of her body might leak out otherwise. Iris leaned back against the lower cabinets, quiet, not prying, just there. Then, with a breath that sounded like something cracked inside her chest, Ruth rose. Her legs trembled but held. She walked past the bloodied napkin, past the shattered phone and its lifeless screen, and disappeared into the hallway. Iris followed, careful not to step on the glass. Upstairs, the guest bedroom door creaked open. This was where Ruth had kept her things, where her life was allowed to exist, condensed into neat drawers and quiet corners, curated, censored, tolerated. She knelt beside the cedar chest beneath the window, fingers tracing the worn brass latch. It clicked open with a dry groan. Inside, beneath a stack of church bulletins and folded scarves, sat a weathered green spiral notebook. The edges were soft with use. Its pages were creased, corners dog-eared. When she opened it, ink bloomed across ruled lines in tight, neat loops, decades of numbers, names, and sentences written in her hand. Not just phone numbers, memories. Pastor Lauren, 215-559-034. Sunday school sign-up starts August 12. Ask about Isaiah's food drive. Denise arrived at the clinic, 412-887-4421. She says the nurse practitioner is nicer. Ask for morning appointments. Marcus Landry, 607-335-0080. If anything happens, he will help. Keep him in mind. Ruth flipped through pages filled with people Hannah had worked hard to erase, a list she'd quietly built back up, line by line, like planting seeds no one could see. She ran a fingertip across Marcus's number. She hadn't called him in years, not since the will dispute after her father died, but his last message still echoed in her head. If you ever need to know your rights, call me, no judgment. Iris knelt beside her. You saved everyone's mail for a reason, she said softly. Now you'll use it. Ruth nodded. Her jaw set. She tore Marcus's page from the notebook and went to Iris's room, where the landline still hung in its cradle on the desk. Hannah never paid it any mind, said landlines were for the weak. The phone rang twice. Marcus Landry. It's Ruth. A pause. She could hear the chair creak as he sat up. Are you safe? He asked. Ruth closed her eyes. Define safe. I mean, is she there? She's asleep, probably. Another pause. Tell me everything. Ruth gave him the highlights. The shattered phone. The flash drive. The feeling that things had crossed some final threshold she couldn't walk back from. I don't want her reading my messages, or touching my bank, or erasing the rest of me. You're not paranoid, Marcus said gently. We can lock down your accounts, transfer things to your name only, redirect mail, block monitoring apps if she's installed anything. But once we start, it leaves a trail. That's okay, Ruth whispered. Let her follow it. You'll want to plan the next steps. Housing, income, legal filings if it escalates. Ruth looked down at her notebook. The numbers blurred slightly, but she kept her voice steady. Plan, that's the word. Iris stood in the doorway now, arms folded, eyes sharp. We've got you, she said. We've had you for a while. Now you just get to know it. Ruth hung up, hands still shaking slightly. Not from fear this time, but momentum. She opened a drawer and pulled out her church tote, stuffed it with the notebook, the flash drive, and a stack of old envelopes Iris had rescued from recycling. Names, patterns, dates. Every breadcrumb she'd left herself, waiting for the day she finally chose to follow them. She zipped the bag and slung it over her shoulder. Footsteps creaked upstairs. Hannah. Iris moved to the hallway light and flicked it off. We'll go through the back. Ruth didn't hesitate. As the door closed softly behind them, Ruth turned to her daughter and asked, Do you still have that burner phone? Iris smiled without looking back. Charged and ready. Morning found Ruth in the kitchen again, the same light slanting through the blinds, but everything altered. The air felt cleaner somehow. as if something toxic had burned off overnight. She stood barefoot in her robe, flipping through the worn spiral notebook, a cup of coffee cooling beside her elbow. Across the table, Iris scrolled through the burner phone, jotting down notes in her sketch pad. Both worked silently, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Ruth broke the quiet. "There's something else." Iris looked up. Ruth set the notebook aside and reached into the bread box on the counter. Out came a stack of manila envelopes, edges curled, each one labeled in tidy block letters: utilities, medical, taxes, Hannah. She spread them across the table like a deck of old tarot cards. "I've kept copies," she said. "Everything that mattered, every message that got deleted or rewritten, every bill she said she paid but didn't. I printed them at the library, years of it." Iris blinked. "You printed text messages?" Ruth smiled faintly. Sometimes paper's the only thing she couldn't control. She opened one folder. Inside lay printouts of phone screenshots, text exchanges from holidays, birthdays, arguments that ended with "you're lucky I tolerate you," each one time-stamped, dated, and quietly cataloged. Invoices from the clinic, bank letters showing transfers Hannah claimed never happened. Even notes from Ethan's assistant about property deeds and account access, marked in blue ink. Iris turned the pages slowly, astonished. "You've been keeping evidence this whole time." "I just didn't call it that," Ruth said. "I called it proof of memory." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, eyes sharp with new focus. "Marcus will want to see copies. I'll make another set." "I can handle that," Iris said quickly. "There's a copier at the rec center. Nobody checks the feed tray." She gathered the folders into her backpack with careful precision, as if touching relics. Ruth poured another cup of coffee, steadier now. "He's setting up a consult," she said. "Wants to rewrite the power of attorney. And the phone plan. Everything in my name." "Finally," Iris muttered. "He said once I sign, there's no going back." Ruth nodded, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the black window glass. "That's the point." Later that day, she walked to the post office alone. The sky was brittle blue, wind sharp against her face. Inside, she filled out a certified mail slip and slid a sealed white envelope across the counter. The clerk looked up. "Return receipt?" "Yes, please." Her message was only one sentence long, typed on clean paper, signed with steady hand. "Do not smash what holds me." She didn't add a name. Hannah would know. That night, the group text pinged once. An alert from Hannah. "Hannah, old lady drama." Ignore, then nothing. Silence stretched, then deepened. The little gray dots never appeared again. Ruth sat on the couch, tea cooling in her hands, watching the screen. Ethan's name stayed dark. No one replied. Iris glanced over. "You okay?" Ruth smiled faintly, not sad, not bitter, something calmer. "That's fine. Silence has sound." Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, the trees rustling like a whisper of applause. She leaned back, letting the stillness wrap around her. For the first time in years, her mind wasn't racing with apologies or rehearsed explanations. Just clear, deliberate space. From her bag, she took the flash drive Iris had given her, held it up to the light, and turned it slowly. The metal caught the lamp's glow, a glint of potential, of something waiting to break open. A knock startled her. Iris stiffened. "You expecting someone?" Ruth shook her head. The knock came again, 3 steady taps, not hurried, not uncertain. Someone who knew this house. Ruth stood, every muscle tightening, and crossed the floor quietly. She peered through the sidelight glass. The porch was empty, but on the welcome mat lay an envelope. No postage, no return address, only her name. She opened the door, hand trembling slightly, and bent to pick it up. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed in Hannah's perfect font. "You always did love your little secrets." Ruth looked up at the street, empty but humming with hidden motion. "Mom," Iris whispered from behind her. Ruth folded the note, slipped it into her robe pocket, and locked the door. Change of plans, she said. We move faster. The courthouse air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and exhaustion. Ruth sat across from Marcus in a glass-walled office, her hands folded neatly over a legal pad she hadn't written a word on. The flash drive rested beside her elbow like a loaded weapon no one could see. Marcus adjusted his tie, scanning the screen of his tablet. All right, he said, calm and methodical. We start with your phone accounts. We'll revoke Hannah's administrative access, billing, verification, everything tied to your name. Once it's done, she won't be able to see who you call or when. Ruth nodded. Do it. He tapped a few fields, his tone still professional, but edged with quiet protectiveness. You'll get confirmation texts once each change takes effect. She let out a breath that felt heavier than air. Good, Marcus looked up. We'll also reset insurance logins and remove her as the emergency contact. It's thorough. Ruth, are you ready for what that means? It means she can't erase me again, Ruth said. Yes, I'm ready. By the time they finished, the list of restricted accounts filled 2 pages. Her cell service, her online banking, her prescription portal, even her digital signature access. Marcus watched her as she signed each authorization, one after another, her pen moving with surgical precision. Next step, he said, is a trust. Not the kind people brag about at cocktail parties. This one protects your personal accounts, savings, insurance payouts, retirement. Hannah's name comes off completely. Ethan's too, if you want. Ruth hesitated only for a second. He doesn't use them, but yes, remove them both. Marcus nodded. You'll be sole trustee. I'll manage oversight until you appoint a successor. Ruth's lips tightened. That's fine. I've already lived long enough under someone else's idea of oversight. When the signatures were done, Marcus slid a final document toward her. Limited conservatorship, he explained. It gives me temporary authority over your communications. Not your voice, not your decisions. Just a legal buffer so Hannah can't impersonate you or delete data. It's a firewall. Ruth turned the pen between her fingers. A firewall, I like that. She signed, slow but firm. Outside the window, the courthouse lawn shimmered under pale afternoon sun. A woman in a red jacket pushed a stroller past the fountain. Life continued, oblivious. Back at home, Hannah's fury arrived like thunder. First came the notifications, dozens of them, her name flashing across every muted channel. Hannah, Facebook. Unbelievable how some people weaponize age for pity. Old lady games don't work forever. Hannah Instagram story. People love pretending they're victims when they're really just cleaning up their own mess. Ruth saw the posts only because Iris showed her. They scrolled in silence, the words sharp but empty, like fireworks in daylight. Ruth handed the phone back. She wants noise. We give her none. That night, Iris went door to door along the quiet street. Mrs. Klein next door, the O'Neills across the road, the retired math teacher 2 houses down. Each got a folded paper outlining Ruth's legal protection plan and Marcus's contact card. Just so you know, Iris would say, calm and polite, if anything seems off, you can reach him directly. Every person nodded, sympathy and quiet outrage mixing in their faces. One neighbor hugged her at the end of the walkway, whispering, "She's got no right to treat your mom like that." Inside, Ruth waited by the window, the porch light off. She watched Iris move through the dark like a quiet sentinel, each conversation tightening the circle of safety around her. When Iris came back in, cheeks flushed, she set the stack of remaining leaflets on the counter. "They all know," she said. "They'll watch the house." Ruth smiled faintly. Good. Eyes that don't look away. It was near midnight when Ethan called. His voice was low, almost hoarse. "I heard about what you did," he said. Ruth didn't answer right away. "She's furious," he continued. "I've never seen her like this. But—" He hesitated, voice catching. "I wanted to say thank you for finally drawing a line." Ruth closed her eyes. You didn't need my permission to step over it, too. I know, he said quietly. But seeing you do it, it helps. When the call ended, Ruth sat alone in the half-light of the living room. The air felt different again, charged, deliberate, clean. She opened the drawer beside her chair and removed Hannah's typed note, the one from the porch. The paper crackled faintly in her fingers. She unfolded it, studied the even rows of letters. Then she struck a match. The flame crawled along the edge, bright and hungry. She held it until the last corner blackened and dropped it into the ashtray, watching it curl to nothing. As the smoke drifted upward, the landline rang, once, sharp and mechanical. Ruth stared at it. Iris appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Who would call this late? Ruth didn't answer. She reached for the receiver, lifted it slowly to her ear. A woman's voice, steady, unfamiliar, spoke just 5 words. She knows where you're going. The line went dead. The fluorescent lights in the cell store hummed faintly above rows of glossy display phones. Hannah stood at the counter, a practiced smile fixed on her face. Her designer purse balanced against her wrist. The clerk, young, polite, a little nervous, pulled up the account on his screen. So this new line is for your mother? Exactly, Hannah said, her tone bright, patient, rehearsed. She's had some trouble with her old device. She's not very tech-savvy, poor thing. I just want to make things easier for her. The clerk nodded slowly, typing. Okay, we'll need her photo ID and signature. Hannah's smile faltered for half a heartbeat. Oh, she couldn't make it today, but I have her information right here. She slid a laminated card across the counter, a copy that looked too crisp, too new. The photo was slightly off-center, the font just a shade too bold. The clerk glanced at it, then at Hannah. Do you have power of attorney on the account? Her lips tightened. I handle her affairs. I just have to follow protocol, he said quickly, hands poised above the keyboard but unmoving. I'm her daughter, she said, leaning forward. The sweetness drained from her voice. This is for her. I'm helping her. Another clerk, a woman in her 40s, approached from the back. Everything okay, Jake? Jake hesitated. I just need to verify something. Hannah exhaled sharply, tapping her manicured nails on the counter. You people act like this is espionage. It's a cell phone, not nuclear codes. The older clerk gave a calm smile. We just need direct confirmation from the account holder. If you could have your mother come in or call— I don't have time for this, Hannah snapped. She grabbed the ID, stuffed it back into her bag, and turned on her heel. Forget it. The glass doors slammed behind her, the bell above it rattling long after she was gone. Jake stared at the door, then at the older clerk. That was weird, right? Very, she said. Then her gaze dropped to the name on the account, Ruth Langford, and the emergency contact number listed below. Iris. She hesitated only a moment before pulling out her phone. Text to Iris, unknown number. Hey, this is Molly from CityCell. You don't know me, but someone just tried to open a line for your mom. Said she had permission. Felt off. You might want to check. When Iris's phone buzzed, she was sitting with Marcus at his office desk. The text made her stomach flip. She turned the screen toward him. He read it once, then again, frowning. That's attempted identity fraud, he said. She's trying to get around the account restrictions. What do? We document everything. He pulled a legal pad close, jotting notes in quick practice shorthand. Date, time, attempted phone line activation, false representation of consent. Then he picked up his phone. Within minutes, he'd called the carrier's fraud division, logged the pre-complaint, and instructed the rep to flag the account for any future activation attempts. If she tries again, he told them, I want the store to notify law enforcement before approval. Then he hung up and turned to Iris. I'm filing this under the existing protection plan. It'll trigger bank alerts too. Any linked accounts get frozen on suspicious movement. Iris nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She's cornered, and she knows it. Marcus exhaled. That's when people like her get dangerous. That night, Ruth sat at the kitchen table again, watching the wind press against the windows. She'd heard everything from Iris, listened without flinching. She went to a store, Ruth murmured, tried to buy her way back in. She failed, Iris said. Molly said she left furious. Ruth smiled faintly. She doesn't understand something simple. What's that? You can't buy access to someone who's already gone. She looked at the phone resting on the table, the burner, silent, waiting. The house felt sealed, airtight, intentional. Across town, Hannah's fury found its outlet online. Hannah, Twitter. Apparently setting up a new phone for an ungrateful parent is now fraud. Some people thrive on drama. Hannah, Twitter, next post. Let the martyrs have their stage. The audience always leaves before intermission. Ruth didn't respond. She didn't even look. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water and opened the drawer by the fridge. Inside, the edges of her evidence folders gleamed under the soft light. Iris came up behind her. Marcus said he'll check in tomorrow, just routine follow-up. Ruth nodded, her gaze distant. Routine, she repeated, as if testing the sound of normalcy. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the blinds. A car paused, idling at the curb. Iris froze. Is that? Ruth raised a hand for silence. The engine revved once, then slowly pulled away. In the faint reflection of the window, Ruth caught the outline of a figure in the passenger seat, shoulders stiff, hair pulled into a sharp bun. Hannah, watching. Ruth reached for the light switch and clicked it off. The house fell into darkness. Don't move, she whispered. Iris's breathing steadied beside her. Through the blinds, they watched the taillights vanish around the corner. Only then did Ruth speak again, voice barely audible. She's done trying to buy me, she said. Next, she'll try to break what she can't touch. The morning after the car incident, Ruth woke before the sun. The house was still, the air thick with last night's silence. She padded to the kitchen, lit only by the refrigerator's soft hum, and opened the green spiral notebook. Its pages smelled faintly of dust and ink, a map back to the world Hannah had tried to erase. She picked up the phone, its coiled cord stretching like a lifeline. The first number she dialed trembled in her fingers. Hello? A pause, then a surprised laugh. Ruth Langford? Well, I'll be. Thought you'd fallen off the edge of the world. Not yet, Ruth said, her smile audible. Just working my way back on. Within an hour, she had called 5 people, old friends, choir partners, neighbors who'd stopped by years ago with casseroles that went uneaten because Hannah had said she wasn't up for visitors. Each conversation was a careful excavation, layer after layer of lost warmth unearthed through trembling voices and small bursts of joy. By mid-morning, Iris found her mother sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, phone in hand, pages of the spiral notebook scattered around her like fallen leaves. You've been at it all morning, Iris said gently. Ruth looked up. And it's working. People remember me, Iris. Not the version she told them about. Me, Iris smiled. Then maybe it's time we give them a reason to remember out loud. 2 days later, the invitations went out. Handwritten on cream stationery Ruth found in the back of a drawer. Neighborhood brunch. Let's reconnect, literally. Bring your phone, your stories, and a dish to share. It sounded casual enough to pass for a friendly get-together, but Iris knew better. It was strategy cloaked in hospitality. On Sunday morning, the Langford lawn filled with folding tables, thrifted tablecloths, and the smell of blueberry muffins. The air buzzed with chatter and the occasional ring of cell phones as guests arrived. Neighbors, church members, a few friends from Ruth's volunteer days. Ruth greeted each person with that new, steady calm that seemed to anchor the air around her. So glad you could make it, she said, squeezing hands. Touching shoulders, her eyes shimmered, not from nerves, but from the strange wonder of being seen again. Mrs. Klein arrived with a potato casserole, followed by the O'Neills carrying a fruit platter. Pastor Lauren hugged Ruth like a sister, whispering, "We missed you." By noon, the tables were covered with plates and coffee mugs, and laughter rippled freely across the yard. Iris moved between clusters of guests, snapping photos, nothing posed, just honest moments. Ruth listening intently, a neighbor handing her a slice of pie, two teenage girls showing her how to set up speed dial on the burner phone. When Pastor Lauren suggested they add Ruth to the church's daily call list for seniors, Ruth blinked, momentarily speechless. "You'll get a check-in every day," Lauren said. "We'll rotate who calls. No one falls through the cracks on my watch." Ruth reached for her hand. "I'd like that very much." By mid-afternoon, the yard had settled into easy rhythm, music from a small speaker, the smell of cinnamon and grass, the murmur of revived connections. People were already making plans for next week. A check-in calendar was taped to the fridge before anyone left. One by one, guests hugged her goodbye, promising to call tomorrow or Tuesday or whenever. Ruth believed them. When the last car pulled away, she stood in the doorway, arms folded loosely, watching sunlight glint off the empty dishes on the picnic table. Iris joined her, camera still in hand. They loved it, Iris said. The calls, the food, the photos, all of it. Ruth smiled. "I didn't need the screen to be seen." Iris tilted her head, thoughtful. "You think Hannah's seen the pictures yet?" Ruth's smile didn't falter. "She will." Across town, Hannah scrolled furiously through her phone. The first image stopped her cold. Ruth in a sun hat, laughing between two neighbors, her hand on the shoulder of a man holding a casserole dish. Underneath, the caption, "Rebuilding the neighborhood one call at a time." Reconnect brunch, Chuck Ruth strong. Hannah's jaw tightened. Her own reflection glared back from the screen, warped by the glare of sunlight through the window. She scrolled faster, each image a new offense. Ruth surrounded by faces. Ruth smiling. Ruth alive in color. She threw the phone onto the couch, the screen still glowing. From the kitchen doorway, Ethan spoke quietly. "You started this, you know." Hannah turned, her voice cold. "She's playing victim." Ethan shook his head. "No. She's playing free." Hannah's eyes narrowed, her mouth a tight, furious line. "Then let's see how free she feels when she loses her house." By Monday morning, Hannah's anger had found new footing, this time dressed in civility. Her post appeared first on a local community forum, concerned about elder financial abuse. "Sometimes it's not strangers, it's people close to home. Let's protect our parents." Attached was a link to an online petition calling for oversight of Ruth Langford's finances. The text was phrased just ambiguously enough to sound noble, just personal enough to sting. "She's being controlled," the petition claimed, cut off from her family, manipulated by outsiders with ulterior motives. Within hours, the signatures began rolling in, mostly acquaintances. People who'd never met Ruth but remembered Hannah as that woman from the block with the pretty garden. By afternoon, Hannah was glowing with false purpose, watching the numbers tick upward. "See," she murmured, refreshing the page. "People still believe in me." Ethan watched from the kitchen doorway, silent. He said nothing when she hit share and blasted the link to every platform she could access. By evening, Marcus was sitting in his office with the blinds half drawn, reading the same post through narrowed eyes. Iris stood behind him, her jaw tight. "She's framing it as advocacy," Marcus said. "Classic projection, accuse before you're accused." Ruth sat across from him, calm but pale. "Can she do that?" "She can try," he said, clicking his mouse. "But we're not fighting it in the dark." He opened a draft on his firm's public page and began to type. The post was short, measured, deliberate. No names, no accusations, just a timeline. August 19th, client reports verbal and property aggression from a close relative. August 20th, device destruction verified. See attached photo, permission granted. September 2nd, Client files limited conservatorship for communication security. All actions reviewed and approved by legal counsel. Documentation available upon request. The photo of the shattered phone sat at the end. Cropped close, no faces, no caption. Just evidence, cold and quiet. When Marcus hit publish, the post went live. By midnight, it was everywhere. Neighbors who had been at that dinner, the same ones who had looked down at their plates while Ruth bled silently on the tile, started leaving comments. Mrs. Clean sat next door. I was there that night. The phone wasn't damaged. It was thrown. See the O'Neills. We should have said something sooner. We saw it happen. Ruth never raised her voice once. Lauren from Grace Church. Sometimes silence is complicity. Not again. Their words gathered momentum like falling dominoes. The petition's signature count stopped climbing. Then it started dropping as names were deleted, one by one. Across town, Hannah sat on her couch, scrolling faster and faster. Her post had been buried beneath a wall of rebuttals, each one clearer, louder, more damning than the last. She slammed her laptop shut. They're twisting it. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. They're remembering. What's that supposed to mean? He sighed, setting the phone down. It means people finally saw something they can't unsee. Then, almost gently, he added, and they saw me too. 2 hours later, a new video appeared online, posted from Ethan's account. The camera was still, the lighting soft, the background their living room stripped of any pretense. He looked straight into the lens. My mother, he began quietly, isn't controlled. She's recovering. She's not isolated. She's building community. You can choose to believe lies, or you can look at the facts. She's the anchor in this family, not the weight. He didn't say Hannah's name once. He didn't need to. The comments poured in, each one more decisive than the last. Grace Church Outreach. We stand with Ruth. City Cell. Molly. I was the clerk. She's telling the truth. The Neighborly Watch. Community matters. Lies don't last long here. By dawn, the petition was gone, deleted quietly like a stain scrubbed from glass. The link redirected to an error page, but the screenshots lived on, archived and reposted with a different kind of headline. When control fails, truth speaks. Ruth read none of it. She was in the garden, kneeling in soft earth, planting chrysanthemums in neat, deliberate rows. Iris knelt beside her, phone tucked in her back pocket, silent for once. The morning light washed the yard in gold. The air smelled of damp soil and something cleaner, relief maybe. Ruth brushed her hands together and stood. You can't sign away the truth, she said quietly. Iris smiled. No, but she's trying. Ruth looked toward the street. For a brief second, she thought she saw the shape of a car parked 2 houses down. A silhouette too familiar to ignore. Hannah's, engine idling. Watching again, Ruth didn't flinch. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out her phone, and pressed record. Your move, she whispered. The car pulled away. The knock came just after 10. 3 quick raps, sharp enough to cut through the morning quiet. Ruth looked up from the kitchen table, where she'd been sorting seed packets into neat rows. The front curtains fluttered slightly with the breeze. She didn't need to peek. The rhythm was familiar, impatient, self-assured, and rehearsed. Iris stood at the foot of the stairs, barefoot, holding her coffee. You want me to? Ruth shook her head. No, let her in. The door swung open before Iris reached it. Hannah stepped inside as if she still owned the air, her heels clipping against the wood floor. She carried a manila folder clutched under one arm, a stack of papers visible inside. I don't have much time, she announced. This can go one of 2 ways. Ruth leaned back in her chair, hands folded. Then start with the easier one. Hannah crossed to the table and dropped the folder between the seed packets. These are medical consent forms, she said briskly. You're going to sign them so I can get information from your doctors. The neighbors are worried, Mom. They're saying things. You've got people whispering that you're, well, unwell. The word landed like a dart. Ruth didn't move. Tea? She asked evenly. Hannah blinked. What? Chamomile. Calms nerves. For a moment, confusion cracked the veneer of confidence on Hannah's face. Ruth rose, set the kettle on the stove, and turned the flame to low. The whistle filled the silence between them. Hannah exhaled loudly. You're not listening. These forms are for your benefit. They'll clear everything up. I'm sure they will, Ruth said, placing 2 mugs on the table. Sit down. Hannah hesitated, then pulled out a chair. Her movements were clipped, controlled, like a person balancing a mask that kept slipping. When the tea was poured, Ruth opened her own drawer and laid out a second stack of papers, neat, bound with a blue legal clip. Those are my capacity evaluations, Ruth said, her voice steady. Signed by Dr. Beckett and witnessed by counsel. Marcus filed them last week. They say I'm of sound mind and body. You can read them if you'd like. Hannah's jaw twitched. You had a doctor examine you behind my back. You weren't invited, Ruth replied. Neither was the paranoia you keep selling. Hannah flipped open the top form, scanning furiously. You think this means anything? You think paperwork changes what people believe? Ruth's lips curved slightly. It's not about belief, it's about record. Across the room, Iris had propped her phone discreetly on the counter, its camera angled toward the table. A small placard leaned beside it. Marcus's legal notice laminated in clear plastic. Recording on premises for safety and documentation purposes. The kettle's low whistle quieted to a simmer. Hannah's fingers gripped the pages tighter. You're being manipulated, and I'm not going to let it happen. Manipulated? Ruth echoed. I spent 20 years listening to you tell me who I was allowed to be. That was manipulation. This... She gestured at the documents. The tea? The calm. This is choice. Hannah slammed the papers down, her voice rising. You don't get to rewrite history. Ruth didn't flinch. History rewrites itself when the truth comes out. You just don't like the author. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Outside, a lawnmower buzzed faintly down the block. Hannah pushed back her chair. You think this is over? You think your little legal games and church friends will protect you? You don't know what I can do. Ruth met her gaze, unblinking. You've shown me, Hannah. I just stopped pretending it was love. Hannah's mouth opened, then closed again. Her hands trembled as she gathered her folder, shoving the unsigned forms inside. At the doorway she turned, eyes bright with fury. You'll regret this, when people see who you really are. They already do, Ruth said softly. Hannah's lips tightened to a thin white line. You're going to lose everything. Ruth's voice didn't rise. Everything's already here. Hannah spun on her heel and stormed out. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. For a moment, Ruth stood motionless, listening to the receding sound of heels on pavement. Then she turned to Iris. Did you get it all? Iris checked the phone. Every word. It's saved and backed up. Ruth nodded, then gathered the seed packets from the table, stacking them in calm, deliberate order. Through the window, a gust of wind caught the edge of Hannah's discarded petition flyers, still crumpled on the curb. They fluttered once, then skidded away down the street. Out of sight, out of reach. Ruth watched until the paper disappeared. Let her try, she said quietly. I built something she can't burn. The kettle clicked off behind her. Steam curled upward, faint and ghostly, and from somewhere down the road came the shrill sound of a car horn, long, insistent, and directed right at the house. Ruth didn't move. She just whispered, She's not done. By Wednesday, the rumors started crawling through the phone lines like static. Ruth first heard from Denise at the clinic. She called me, Denise whispered. Voice low, like gossip carried its own electricity. Said you were confused, that someone was exploiting you. I told her I didn't believe it, but she's calling everyone Ruth. Everyone she can find. Ruth exhaled, slow and measured. Thank you for telling me. When she hung up, Iris was standing in the doorway, arms folded. She's doing it again, isn't she? Ruth nodded. her gaze drifting toward the window. She never learned how to stop talking long enough to listen. Iris crossed the room and squeezed her shoulder. Marcus will handle it. He did. By afternoon, Marcus's office was lit only by the glow of 3 monitors and the soft hum of the air vent. His voice was clipped but calm as he spoke into the headset. Yes, Your Honor, we're not seeking damages, only temporary communications restrictions. She's been impersonating her mother, attempting to alter accounts, and distributing false information to third parties. A pause, then a quiet nod. Understood. He typed quickly, filing the request. When the call ended, he texted Ruth, Marcus, order granted. Communications involving your name or identifying info are restricted for 30 days. Any impersonation attempt pings me directly. Ruth. Thank you. I just want her to stop, Marcus. This isn't punishment, Ruth. It's protection. Across town, Hannah sat at her desk surrounded by printed contact lists. Phone numbers, email addresses, scribbled notes beside each name. She dialed one after another, the same tone in her voice each time. Part concern, part outrage. The performance of a daughter just trying to do the right thing. But one by one, the lines broke. Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Account permissions restricted. This number is not accepting blocked calls. She frowned, redialed, tried again, nothing. Her email accounts began bouncing messages back. Delivery failed. When she opened her phone bill, the screen flashed an unfamiliar alert. Outbound activity involving restricted contacts unavailable pending review. What the hell does that mean, she hissed. Stabbing the refresh button. No reply came. Only silence and a new kind of emptiness. The kind that followed her every attempt to reach the world she once controlled. At Ruth's kitchen table, Iris scrolled through her phone and looked up with wide eyes. Marcus just sent the confirmation. Every carrier has flagged her under communications watch. She can't alter your accounts or open new ones without direct court approval. Ruth stirred sugar into her tea, watching it swirl like smoke. Then maybe the silence will teach her what peace sounds like. Iris's phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. Ethan. She tried to set up a charity in Grandma's name. Said it was for elder awareness. Marcus caught it before launch. Iris's mouth fell open. She's building fake nonprofits now. Ruth didn't answer. She simply reached for her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and began writing, slow, deliberate lines in her looping cursive. What control takes, truth eventually unravels. Her handwriting trembled slightly, but the words were steady. That evening, Hannah's frustration metastasized into fury. She called Marcus's office twice, blocked. Then the bank, restricted. Even her old church refused to patch her through after a polite, "We're aware of the situation." Finally, she called a neighbor, Mrs. Klein. The phone rang 7 times before the older woman picked up. "Hannah," Mrs. Klein said, voice flat. "Whatever you're trying to do, it's not working anymore." "I'm protecting my mother," Hannah snapped. "Don't you get it? She's not thinking clearly." "Good night, Hannah," Mrs. Klein said, and hung up. The silence afterward was louder than any argument. Back at Ruth's house, the evening was soft, wind brushing through the open windows. A soft radio played somewhere, an old song Ruth hadn't heard in years. Marcus stopped by briefly to drop off a hard copy of the court order. "It's airtight," he said, setting the folder on the table. "She can't speak on your behalf, can't alter your accounts, can't impersonate you online. Every system recognizes the restriction." Ruth traced a finger over the embossed seal. "It's strange," she murmured. "You spend years afraid someone will silence you, and when they finally do, it's her own voice they quiet." Marcus gave a small, sad smile. Sometimes justice just looks like a mute button. He left soon after, headlights fading into the dusk. Ruth lingered at the table long after Iris had gone to bed. She watched the phone, the same one that used to be a weapon in someone else's hands, now resting still in hers. Outside, crickets began their nightly chorus, peaceful, earnest, uninterrupted. The phone buzzed once, a new message. Unknown number. You can't hide forever. Ruth stared at it, the message flickering on the screen like a spark in the dark. She didn't delete it, didn't reply. She simply saved it, then slid the phone into the desk drawer beside the flash drive. Her reflection in the window looked calm, steady, unbreakable. Then, from outside, the faint glow of headlights flashed across her living room wall, stopped, and stayed. Ruth rose slowly, every muscle tightening. The car didn't move. The next morning, the car was gone, but by noon, its ghost reappeared. On screen, Hannah had gone live. Her voice streamed through neighborhood feeds and community groups, shaking with righteous fatigue. My mother's being manipulated, she declared. She's cut off, controlled by people who claim to care. This is what financial elder abuse looks like. The camera panned briefly over her spotless kitchen, the curated background of someone desperate to look composed. A flicker of nervousness betrayed her, though, an extra blink, a twitch of her jaw each time she said, "Mom." At first, a few watchers chimed in with sympathy. So sad. Hope she's okay. But it didn't last. 10 minutes later, the refutations started rolling in. Grace Church outreach. Ruth's with us every Sunday. She's healthy, active, and leading our senior phone check-ins. Mrs. Klein pa right next door. We saw what happened at that dinner, Hannah. Maybe stop pretending. City Watch admin. This post violates community standards. Pending review. Within the hour, the live stream flattened into silence, its replay swamped with comments, screenshots, and testimonies. A moderator added a note under the video. Verified reports indicate the subject of this stream is safe and under no coercion. Allegations unfounded. The feed froze, then disappeared. That afternoon, a local blogger picked up the story, someone known for covering small-town scandals with an air of reluctant integrity. The post went viral in its own quiet way. Elder autonomy and the digital divide, it read. When independence is questioned, truth leaves a trail, usually in paperwork. Attached was Ruth's timeline, the same Marcus had posted weeks ago, updated and thorough. The piece painted Ruth not as victim or villain, but as something rarer, a survivor who refused to vanish. By evening, the article had been shared on half a dozen advocacy pages, the comment section filled with strangers offering support. Elder care advocates, clear case of projection, well handled by her counsel. Our Legal Voices podcast. Interview request for Marcus Landry, pending. Hannah's name wasn't mentioned directly, but her office inbox began to ping. From Board Secretary. We've had inquiries about recent online activity. The firm values reputation management. Let's schedule a meeting. She stared at the message, the cursor blinking like a pulse. Her reflection in the darkened monitor looked older than it had 2 weeks ago. Across town, Ethan's phone buzzed with new notifications. Ben R. Saw the video. Dude, your grandma's a legend, Melissa. T. Your mom's lost it. Sorry, but everyone's saying it. Trevor H. We're on Grandma's side, man. He texted back a single reply to all three. Ethan. She earned her side. The rest of us just had to notice. Then he set his phone down, his eyes lingering on the family photo above the fireplace, Ruth smiling between them, Hannah looking away. Meanwhile, Iris sat at the kitchen counter, tapping her pen against a yellow pad covered in circles and lines. What's that? Ruth asked from the sink. Phone tree, Iris said. I'm building redundancy. If one number doesn't reach you, another will. Church, neighbors, friends, even Ethan's classmates volunteered. Ruth smiled. It's like roots. Exactly, Iris said. No one gets lost when everyone's connected. That evening, the sun melted behind the trees, leaving the air warm and slow. Ruth carried a mug of chamomile out to the porch and settled into her rocking chair. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet she'd learned to trust again. Her phone rested on the small table beside her. Every few minutes, it buzzed softly, A check-in text, a greeting, a shared photo of a casserole cooling on someone's counter. She didn't answer them all. She didn't need to. The messages themselves were proof of something rebuilt. From the yard, she could hear laughter, a few of the neighbors' kids riding bikes, their voices bright in the gathering dusk. She closed her eyes, letting the sound fill the space that used to be fear. Iris stepped onto the porch and leaned against the railing. "They asked if you'd lead next week's brunch again," Ruth chuckled softly. "As long as no one brings store-bought pie." They shared a small, easy silence. In the distance, a siren wailed once, then faded. The sky deepened to indigo. Ruth took a slow sip of tea. "You know," she said, "I used to think losing everything meant disappearing. Turns out, it just meant clearing the noise." Iris smiled. "And now?" Ruth looked out across the street, where, faintly, the glow of a phone screen flickered inside a parked car. Her voice dropped. "Now the noise is watching me." The summons arrived on a Thursday, slipped under the door like a threat pretending to be polite. Ruth picked it up, turning the crisp envelope in her hands. Across the top, in embossed serif font, the words, "Petition for Restorative Family Contact." She didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. Iris watched from the kitchen. "She actually filed?" Ruth nodded, setting the envelope on the counter. She never met a wall she didn't try to paint as a door. By nightfall, Marcus had called. His voice was steady, clipped with focus. "Don't panic. It's dressed up as compassion, but it's an access suit. She's trying to get around the restrictions by calling it reconciliation." Ruth's tone was dry. "So she's suing for the right to talk." "Essentially," Marcus said, "and we'll show why that's not safe." The courthouse smelled faintly of old carpet and sanitizer when the hearing day arrived. Ruth sat beside Marcus at the polished wooden table, a stack of folders between them. He flipped open the top file, its tabs neatly labeled in blue ink. Evidence packet, Exhibit AF. Inside were photographs and printouts. The broken phone, spiderwebbed and sharp. Statements from neighbors describing that dinner night. Transcripts of Hannah's recorded threats. Documentation of every fraudulent attempt to access Ruth's accounts. Carrier logs showing system flags, triggered by impersonation. Each page told a story Hannah had refused to stop writing, even when she'd lost the pen. Across the aisle, Hannah sat with her attorney, posture rigid, jaw locked. She wore pale gray, the color of control, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twitching against the tabletop. When the judge entered, the room hushed. A gavel tapped once. "Ms. Langford," the judge began, eyes moving from Hannah to Ruth. "This petition claims you've been denied familial contact due to coercive influence. Is that accurate?" Hannah straightened, her voice syrup smooth. "Yes, Your Honor. My mother's been isolated. I only want what's best for her." Marcus rose. "Permission to respond, Your Honor." "Proceed." He handed the judge a binder, its weight audible as it landed. These materials document a year-long pattern of aggression, deception, and attempted financial interference. Each claim is supported by verified evidence. My client has never barred contact. She's simply stopped permitting abuse to masquerade as love. He gestured to the photo of the smashed phone, projected on the courtroom monitor. This was the night it began. Hannah's attorney objected half-heartedly, overruled. Then came the statements, neighbors, colleagues, even Ethan's brief affidavit confirming his mother's escalating behavior. With each exhibit, Hannah's composure fractured a little more. Her lips tightened. Her foot tapped under the table. By the time Marcus played the short audio clip of Hannah's last recorded threat, "You'll regret this." When people see who you really are, the courtroom's silence turned tangible. When he finished, the judge folded her hands. "Ms. Langford," she said, addressing Hannah, "this case does not meet the standard for relief. In fact, it presents strong evidence of harassment." Hannah's mouth opened, then closed again. The judge's voice softened, but not kindly. "Family is not an entitlement, Ms. Langford. It's a responsibility." A beat of silence. Then, "This suit is dismissed." You are ordered to pay all associated court costs and attend 6 weeks of anger management counseling. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. The gavel struck once, decisive as thunder. Outside, sunlight poured across the courthouse steps. Ruth paused halfway down, feeling the weight of it, the warmth she hadn't expected. Marcus tucked the folders under his arm. "It's over," he said quietly. Ruth exhaled through a trembling smile. "No," she said, "it's beginning." A week later, she stood at the front of the community center, a semicircle of older neighbors before her, each clutching a phone or tablet. On a whiteboard behind her, the words, "Reclaiming Connection, Phone Safety 101, were written in neat green marker. Ruth's voice carried steady through the room. "Technology's only as isolating as the fear attached to it," she said. "Let's start by making it ours again." They laughed when she stumbled through a Wi-Fi setup tutorial and applauded when she got it right. By the end of the hour, every person had at least one emergency contact and a backup plan. As they packed up, Pastor Lauren hugged her. "You turned your pain into a classroom, Ruth." Ruth smiled softly. "No, I just stopped letting silence do all the teaching." That evening, she locked up the center and stepped into the amber dusk. The air felt lighter, charged with something clean and open. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown, you think you've won." She looked up. Across the parking lot, a figure leaned against a car, arms crossed, face hidden by shadow. Ruth's hand tightened around her phone, but her voice, when it came, was quiet and even. "No," she murmured. "I learned." The envelope arrived by courier, thick and official, sealed with the embossed stamp of the county clerk. Marcus opened it in Ruth's kitchen, the same table where her spiral notebook once lay like a heartbeat. "These," he said, sliding the papers free, "are the call logs." Ruth's brow furrowed. "From her account?" "From 3 of them," Marcus said, "subpoenaed, verified through carrier archives." He flipped to a highlighted section. "Here, look." Ruth leaned closer. The pages were lined with dates, times, and familiar numbers. Her doctor, her bank, even the church office. Each call was marked under spoofed origin. Attempted voice authentication failure. "She tried to sound like you," Marcus said quietly. Voice replication, phone tree passwords, even fake voicemail recordings. She built an entire phantom version of you. Ruth pressed a hand to her chest, not out of fear, but disbelief. "She practiced my voice?" "Dozens of times," Marcus confirmed. "Enough that the software flagged her tone patterns. It's all here, documented." He placed another sheet in front of her, an email thread between Hannah and a media contact she'd tried to court weeks earlier. Her words were there, plain and devastating. "If the story doesn't move fast enough, I can feed you something about cognitive decline." "It'll get traction." The silence that followed was long and cold. Ruth looked up slowly. And people believed her. "They did," Marcus said, "but they won't anymore." By Friday, the subpoenas rippled outward. Hannah's employer received a formal notice confirming the fraudulent calls. The firm's HR department issued a statement by noon. Pending investigation, Ms. Langford is suspended from all client communications. Prior advisories attributed to her are rescinded. It was clinical, detached, but underneath the message was clear. Her credibility had imploded. Within hours, 2 clients canceled meetings. A third postponed indefinitely. The polite wording, rescheduling for later in the quarter, didn't hide what it was: distance. At her desk, Hannah scrolled through her emails, her pulse racing. One by one, her name vanished from distribution lists. Internal messages stopped copying her. Her inbox filled with silence. She slammed her laptop shut, the echo sharp and hollow. Across town, Ruth's workshops had doubled in size. The local paper had sent a photographer, capturing her mid-laugh, as she demonstrated how to block scam calls. The headline ran 2 days later. From target to teacher, Local woman turns digital abuse into advocacy. The article spread through community groups faster than any smear ever had. Calls came in from nearby counties asking if she'd host sessions there too. Ruth kept her answers humble. "It's just neighbors helping neighbors," she'd say. But every time she spoke, her voice carried that steady warmth that people trusted now, instinctively. The night of her birthday, the house glowed. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the kitchen as Iris pulled a cake from the oven, her hair tied up, cheeks dusted with flour. "You didn't have to do all this," Ruth said. "Are you kidding? You're the most famous person on Maple Avenue," Iris teased. By 7, the doorbell was ringing nonstop. Neighbors with cards, friends with flowers, even Pastor Lauren holding a phone aloft like a badge. "Just syncing her contacts for her daily calls," she joked, drawing laughter from the crowd. When Ruth blew out the candles, she looked around the room, faces she'd once thought she'd lost, all gathered back under one roof. The noise, the warmth, the life, for a woman who'd lived through silence, it was everything. Across town, Hannah sat in a half-lit office, staring at her phone. A notification blinked, a message from her attorney. From J. Keller, Esker. "Given recent developments, I strongly advise settlement. Continuing to contest could trigger a defamation claim. Let's discuss terms." Hannah's jaw tightened. She typed back only 3 words. Not a chance. Then, impulsively, she hit post on her public page. Another declaration, another attempt to reclaim the stage. The truth will come out. It always does. Within minutes, the comments began flooding in. But this time, no one defended her. The feed felt colder than ever, like talking into glass. Back at Ruth's, the guests had begun to leave. Iris collected plates, humming softly. Ruth sat on the porch with the last slice of cake, the night air sweet and alive. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus. She refused settlement. Her counsel's pulling back. It's unraveling fast. Ruth typed her reply, slow and deliberate. Ruth. Sometimes the truth doesn't come out. It's pulled out. She set the phone down beside her teacup and looked up at the stars. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. Clean, earned, and absolute. Then headlights swept across her yard. Too bright, too slow, stopping just past the gate. Ruth didn't move. From the dark interior of the car, a camera flash flickered once. The hearing that made everything permanent took less than an hour. Marcus emerged from the courthouse steps with a folder tucked under his arm, the mid-morning light catching on the silver clip. Ruth stood beside him, steady in her cream cardigan, the wind tugging faintly at her hair. "It's done," Marcus said. "Permanent protections are in place. Any attempt to impersonate, access, or modify your accounts triggers civil penalties. And if she keeps pushing, automatic referral to the district attorney's office." Ruth nodded, quiet relief softening the line of her shoulders. "So the next time she pretends to be me." "She won't get through the first sentence," Marcus finished. "The system will flag it, and I'll know within the hour." For the first time in years, Ruth allowed herself a full, deep breath. "Then we're safe." Back home, she spread a stack of fresh forms across the kitchen table. The final set Marcus had drafted that morning. These weren't about money or property. They were about trust. Her pen moved neatly through each section. Medical proxy, emergency contact, authorized communication chain. She checked each box deliberately, her handwriting clear and unhurried. Under primary contact, she wrote Ethan Langford. Under secondary contact, Pastor Lauren Reed. Under backup, Marcus Landry, Esker. Then, at the bottom of the page, one final line. Individuals excluded from all decision-making authority. Hannah Langford. She paused a moment before signing. The pen hovered. Then she pressed down firmly, ink flowing in a graceful curve that ended with a flourish. Iris, watching from the counter, exhaled softly. "That must feel heavy." Ruth looked up. "It feels accurate." By the following week, the new legal framework was in motion. Community organizations, medical offices, and the bank received copies of the finalized orders. At the community center, Pastor Lauren read hers twice, then looked up at Ruth. "She's not allowed to call here again, right?" "Not even to apologize," Ruth said. "Good," Lauren replied simply. "We've had enough performance for one lifetime." Elsewhere, Hannah's attempts began to collapse in real time. She tried calling the Grace Outreach line, blocked. Tried emailing the church directory, filtered. When she dialed the bank, the automated system routed her straight to a message. "Your number has been restricted from this account. Further attempts may result in legal action." Frustration built like static in her chest. Each number she tried pushed her further into silence. 2 days later, Pastor Lauren received a certified letter from Hannah. Accusatory, long-winded, and unsigned. It joined a growing pile on Marcus's desk labeled harassment documentation. He didn't read them anymore. He simply filed them. That same week, Ethan stopped by Ruth's house. He stood in the doorway, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his expression soft but uncertain. "I, got the paperwork," he said. "You listed me on the contact forms. Trustee, too." Ruth smiled gently. "Small things, Ethan. Just in case I ever need someone to sign for the church fund or help the center." He nodded slowly. "I know. Still, thank you." They sat at the table for a long while, sipping coffee that went cold. It was the kind of silence that used to feel fragile. Now it felt earned. By late September, Hannah's circle had thinned to almost nothing. The people who once defended her now ghosted her calls, letting them slide unanswered into voicemail purgatory. Her online posts drew only the hollow echo of her own words. She tried calling Ethan once more, her voice cracking with something between anger and desperation. "Please just tell her I need to talk," she said. Ethan's reply was calm, final. "She's already heard everything." Click. That night, Hannah sat in her car outside Ruth's house, the one she'd driven past so many times it had become a ritual of resentment. The windows were dark, the porch light glowed low, steady. Something white caught her eye. A folded sheet of paper resting against the mailbox. She stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath her heels, and picked it up. No envelope, no signature. Just a single sentence written in Ruth's clean, unmistakable hand. "You broke my phone, not my life." The words hit her harder than shouting ever could. She stood there in the soft hum of the streetlight, paper trembling in her grip. The night seemed to lean in close, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. Inside, Ruth sat on the living room couch, the lamp throwing a quiet halo over her lap. The house was still except for the low tick of the clock. Iris peeked through the curtains. She read it. Ruth nodded without looking up. "Good. Think she'll come back." Ruth took a slow sip of tea. "Not for me, maybe for what she lost." Outside, the sound of the car door slammed, a sharp punctuation against the quiet. Then the engine revved once and faded into the distance. Ruth exhaled. She reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts, each name representing a thread she'd rewoven, a voice that reached back. Then her thumb paused over a new notification at the top of the screen. "Unknown number. You think you're done with me?" Ruth stared at the message for a long moment, her reflection faint in the glass. Then she whispered, not to the phone, but to the empty air, "You're the one who's alone now." Outside, the night pressed closer, quiet, heavy, and waiting. The morning light fell soft and angled across the kitchen table, landing on a small unopened box. The label read simply, Nova 1 Senior Plus, secure, simple, smart. Ruth traced a fingertip along the edge of the packaging. Her old phone, shattered and useless, still sat on a shelf nearby like an artifact, its web of cracks catching the sunlight. "Ready?" Iris asked, sliding a mug of coffee across the table. "New chapter." Ruth smiled faintly. Let's see if I remember how to start one. A volunteer from the community tech team, a gentle man named Sam with salt gray hair and patient hands, stood beside them, unpacking cables and instruction sheets. This one's easy, he said. Preloaded encryption, backup vault, verified contacts only. Nobody gets in unless you let them. He powered it on. The screen glowed, a clean white light with a calm welcome tone. Ethan, sitting nearby with his laptop, began entering names. You've got 22 contacts, he said, all verified. Neighbors, Pastor Lauren, Marcus, the community center. No duplicates, no unknowns. Iris leaned over his shoulder, tapping through the interface. And I added a call record app, strictly consent-based. If anyone gives you trouble again, the record keeps you safe. Sam adjusted his glasses. Encrypted backups upload automatically every night. If anything happens, nothing's lost. Ruth looked from one face to the next. Their quiet competence, their easy rhythm. It felt less like a repair session and more like a ceremony. When Sam finally slid the phone toward her, screen unlocked and gleaming, the room went still. Go ahead, Iris said softly. Touch it. Ruth lifted it carefully, like something fragile and holy. The glass was smooth beneath her fingers, unbroken, unmarred. Her reflection stared back, clear for once. She smiled, small and steady. You know, she murmured, I used to think this thing was a leash. Maybe it was just a tool I forgot how to hold. Iris exhaled, smiling. Welcome back, Mom, Ethan grinned. You're officially tech secured. Sounds like a superhero, she said. Maybe that's what survival is. By afternoon, the new phone had become part of her rhythm. She texted the neighborhood volunteers about meal rotations, helped Pastor Lauren coordinate next week's outreach schedule, and even called Denise at the clinic to thank her for standing up, for staying kind. Her voice came through clear on the new line, warm and steady. Every ping of a message, every answered call felt like reclaiming ground she'd once surrendered piece by piece. Later that week, her phone help group at the community center had doubled again. Elderly neighbors arrived with their own devices, some taped, some ancient, all carried like burdens. Ruth taught them how to spot spoofed calls, lock accounts, and save messages securely. You don't have to know everything, she told them. You just have to stop believing you know nothing. When one woman asked why she was so patient, Ruth smiled. Because I know what it feels like to lose your voice to someone else's number. Across town, Hannah scrolled through her tablet, watching a short clip posted by the local paper. Ruth demonstrating emergency contacts, smiling for the camera beside a banner that read, Safe Calls, Strong Voices. The caption beneath the photo read, Community leader and advocate Ruth Langford expands her digital literacy outreach program this fall. Hannah's face stayed unreadable, but her fingers trembled as she set the tablet down. The silence in her apartment was thick, the kind that hummed around the edges. No new messages, no one asking for her version. No one left to call. She stood by the window, staring out at nothing, the reflection of her phone screen flickering against the glass. Notifications empty. The world muted. That evening, Ruth sat at her kitchen table again, the new phone resting beside a stack of donation receipts. She signed one more check, made out to Hopeline, Senior Abuse and Crisis Support. Under memo, she wrote, Ingratitude and Survival. The amount wasn't large, but the meaning was exact. It came directly from the sanctions Hannah had been ordered to pay. Iris appeared at her shoulder, reading over her mother's hand. You're donating in her name? Ruth nodded. Let her name do something decent for once. Iris smiled softly. That's poetic. Justice usually is, Ruth said, sealing the envelope. Later, after Iris and Ethan had gone home, Ruth sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The only light came from the phone screen as it dimmed to its screensaver. A looping image of the garden outside, chrysanthemums in soft bloom. She unlocked it one last time, scrolling through the names she'd re-entered herself that morning. Each contact felt like a heartbeat returned. Then her thumb froze over one entry she hadn't added. No name, just a number. Blocked, but still visible under the system log. The timestamp read 9:04 p.m., a missed call attempt. She stared at it, the digits unfamiliar yet unmistakable. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the screen. Then, softly, she whispered, "You can watch Hannah, but you can't reach me anymore." The phone vibrated once, no caller ID, then fell silent again. Outside, the wind rose, rustling through the garden. Ruth set the phone face down on the table, the glow fading to darkness. By late spring, the house hummed with the quiet rhythm of incoming calls. Every morning, Ruth's phone came alive before breakfast. Soft chimes, familiar names lighting the screen like small beacons. Denise from the clinic calling to ask about lunch plans. Pastor Lauren checking in before Sunday service. Mrs. Klein announcing, "We're bringing the cobbler recipe back for the next brunch." Each voice was a thread woven into something whole again. The kitchen table, once scattered with legal documents and sleepless nights, now held a spiral-bound notebook labeled in careful handwriting. Contacts who care. Each page bore names, numbers, small notes. Call on Thursdays, loves gardening, knows good coffee shops. She'd started it for the phone help group, but it had become something else. A record of her recovery, written one call at a time. Ethan's number topped the list. He was off at college now, 2 states away, but his voice still came through every Saturday morning without fail. "Guess who survived midterms?" he'd announce, laughter spilling through the speaker. "Also, you've been name-dropped in 3 of my essays. My professor thinks you're fictional." Ruth smiled every time. "You tell her I'm the most real person you know." He'd laugh again, promise to visit after finals, and hang up only when Iris poked her head into his dorm room to remind him that Mom doesn't need to hear your laundry woes. Ruth loved their calls most at night, when the world quieted and the phone screen glowed like a candle in the dark. He'd talk about campus protests, late-night pizza, new friends, ordinary things. The sound of a life beginning, not breaking. And every time the line clicked off, she whispered, "Keep going." At the community center, her phone help group had grown into a weekly ritual. Tables lined with seniors and volunteers, stacks of printed guides labeled "Block the Scam, Keep the Friend." Ruth moved between them, phone in hand, demonstrating safety features, laughing when someone forgot a password and turned it into a story. Local news cameras stopped by again. The reporter smiled as Ruth held up her phone for the segment. "This is more than just a device now," she said. "It's proof that no one gets to decide who you can reach." Applause followed. Later that night, when she returned home, the same device buzzed again, neighbors texting thank yous, friends sending photos from the session. Each message was its own little pulse of connection. She sat at her table and wrote a new line in her binder. "Calls today, 12. Each one real." Across town, Hannah's phone sat face up on her desk, the screen black, a thin layer of dust creeping along the edges. The certified envelope lay beside it, sealed in the kind of legal weight she could feel through the paper. Her attorney's name was stamped in blue across the top. When she opened it, her breath hitched. This notice serves as final confirmation of permanent restrictions. Any direct attempt to contact Ruth Langford, via phone, message, or digital medium, will result in immediate legal enforcement. All communication must proceed exclusively through counsel. She stared at the letter until the words blurred. Then she turned her phone over, staring at the blank call log. It was immaculate. No missed calls, no texts, no notifications. A perfect, painful ledger of absence. For the first time, the silence she had forced on someone else had come back to live with her. The following weekend, Iris and Ethan returned home. The air smelled of cinnamon and sunlight. Ruth was in the kitchen, hanging a new frame on the wall above the sideboard. It was a shadow box. Inside, the remains of her old phone. Cracked glass, splintered casing, tiny flecks of metal caught under the light. Next to it, a photo of her new device resting on the table beside a cup of tea. its screen glowing faintly with missed calls from friends. Below, a small brass plaque read, "Then and now." Ethan stood behind her, arms folded. "That's strangely beautiful," Ruth smiled. "History tends to look better after it stops hurting." They ate dinner together, laughter mingling with the hum of evening. The phone buzzed on the counter, someone from her class asking about tomorrow's lesson. She answered quickly, warmly, naturally. The line filled with laughter and warmth, as if the house itself had learned to breathe again. Across town, Hannah sat alone at her kitchen table, her phone face down beside a half-empty glass of wine. No calls, no messages. Only the faint buzz of the refrigerator breaking the silence. She stared at the wall, at the empty spaces where pictures used to hang. Then she opened her messaging app one last time and typed her mother's number. It flashed red, blocked. The quiet that followed was total. Back in her kitchen, Ruth adjusted the frame one last time, stepping back to study it. The fractured reflection of the old phone glimmered faintly under the lamp. She could almost hear the echo of that night. The sound of glass shattering, Hannah's voice hissing. "You don't need to talk to anyone anyway." Ruth smiled, not cruelly, just knowingly. She turned to Iris and said, her voice soft but certain, "My daughter smashed my phone on the floor and said, 'You don't need to talk to anyone anyway.' So I made sure she had no one left to call when I cut her off." The light caught the edge of the shadow box as she spoke, the broken glass sparkling like truth reclaimed.